Good evening, professionals. In our ninth corporate law webinar series, we have started discussing about the new provisions on the labor code, and we have started from last week to discuss about the IRC, the Industrial Relations Code, out of the four codes. And while we discuss about the new changes, we will also compare it with the old provisions as enshrined in the respective legislations which are now replaced, and the code is the effective governing provision now for all the industrial establishments. A sincere thanks to Aishwarya for this detailed presentation. These are various legends used in today's presentation. Of course, the code refers to your Industrial Relations Code for the purpose of discussions. CG, SG are the appropriate governments, which will be the central and state government. And trade union, we will complete trade union today. Last week, we discussed about the trade union provisions. And we will continue with the provisions of trade union today, and all the general provisions, the general terminologies as relevant to trade union and standing orders. We will complete the definition section and then get into the respective provisions. So we will get into the funds of trade union, the general funds and the special funds as they call it, and the disqualification of office bearer. Those events or circumstances which lead to disqualification of office bearer. Who is office bearer, we will see in the next slide. And various corporate restructurings that can happen in the registered trade union, including the name change, amalgamation, and finally dissolution. Thanks to the code, the 74-year Industrial Employment Standing Order Act is now replaced. Act 1946 is thus replaced with the standing order. Of course, most of the provisions almost are retained in the existing code. We will see the existing provisions in the light of the enactment in comparison with the old act. Powers of the certifying officer or the appellate authority and the operation modification of standing orders. So this is the outline of today's webinar. Certifying officer means any officer appointed by the appropriate government to perform the functions of certifying officer under the provisions of Chapter 4. Chapter 4 deals with your standing orders. And office bearer includes any member of the executive but does not include an auditor. Thus, your statutory auditor is not forming part of your office bearer with regard to trade union. Standing order refers to all the matters as set out in the first schedule. Wages, you have the meaning, inclusive definition and the exclusions. The meaning talks about the remuneration, which could be in the form of salary, allowances, or any remuneration in terms of money or consideration other than in the form of cash, but it shall be in cognizance to the employment, be it express or implied terms thereto, and it thus includes your basic pay, DA, retaining allowance. It excludes, however, your bonus, any perquisite excluded from the wage computation by either a general or special order, contribution by employer to the provident fund, conveyance allowances, the retirement allowances, specific allowance including your gratuity and commission thereto. We'll conclude trade union chapter 3 provisions today. The two specific funds are the general fund and the separate fund. General funds could be for the objects other than the ones as may be prescribed. So we have to wait and see what are those as may be prescribed under the code. And separate fund, registered trade union may constitute a separate fund to promote civil and political interest of members. However, a person is not bound to provide or contribute to this separate fund. So just because he does not contribute, he will not be excluded from the benefits of the trade union. So this is the saving grace available to these non-contributing members of the trade union. And this contribution again shall not be made as a caveat for admitting any member of the trade union. So all these provisions are as retained from your Trade Union Act, the erstwhile provisions. Immunity from civil suit in certain cases. Against any registered trade union or office bearer or member with regard to any contravention or furtherance of any industrial dispute, no suit shall be maintainable. So it is again a defense available to all these registered trade unions, to which a member of the trade union is a party on the ground that such act induces some other person to break a contract of employment, or the right of such other person to dispose of his capital at his own will. So in which case there is a defense available to this trade union or office bearer or member, and they shall not be proceeded against any civil suit. Likewise, there is a defense available against a trade union for any tortious act, that is any civil wrong which is committed by any agent of the trade union, if he was not given such a power by the trade union. So he is acting beyond the powers. He is usurping the powers as provided by the trade union in the capacity as an agent, in which case the trade union cannot be held liable or responsible for his acts. Office bearer member shall not be liable for any internal agreement or contractual arrangement between members, which is for promoting the objects as specified in section 15. So section 15 again talks about the previous slide, the general funds which are in consonance with the objects for which the trade union is established, or a separate fund which is constituted by such registered trade union. For what purpose? It is for protecting the civil and political interest of the members. So where these funds are established and there is going to be an arrangement between the members, then the office bearer or member shall not be held liable. If any agreement is made for committing an offence, then the imprisonment shall be for a term up to 6 months or fine, or both as the case may be. And this provision, agreement between members inter se, or the books of accounts to be maintained for inspection, and the right of minor to be a member, all these are retained from the old provisions as available in your Trade Union Act, erstwhile provision. So there is no difference except for right of minor. There the age in the old act was on attaining 14 years of age. Now under the code it says that this person employed in a non-hazardous industry and subject to the rules of the trade union may enjoy all rights of a member. But in the old act, it was 15, the age limit was 15. So that is the only difference with regard to this slide when comparing the new code with the old provisions of the Act, Trade Union Act. Agreement between the members shall not be void or voidable by reason that the objects are in restraint of trade. Just because the agreement is in restraint of the trade, calling, business or profession, the agreement between the members shall not be construed as void or rendered invalid. And this agreement between members inter se shall not enable any civil court to entertain any legal proceedings for recovering any damages or for enforcing any contractual obligation for the breach of agreement concerning the conditions on which any member shall not or shall sell goods or transact business or employ or be employed. So in both these cases, the agreement between the members is thus protected by virtue of this code. Friends, please stop me if you have any doubts on this subject matter. When will the office bearer be disqualified? When he is of an age less than 18 years, or he is convicted for an offence involving moral turpitude, or unsentenced to imprisonment, and 5 years has not elapsed from the date of this imprisonment being sentenced, or disqualified by tribunal. Friends, the meaning of tribunal is, the definition section clearly says the tribunal means the tribunal thus constituted as industrial tribunal under section 44 of the code. While you refer to 44 of the code, it talks about the industrial tribunal, like for how companies you have the National Company Law Tribunal for all the industries with regard to settlement of the industrial disputes and for the purpose of meeting the objectives as enshrined in this industrial relations code. You have this industrial tribunal as constituted, and the powers, functions and the authority of this particular tribunal shall be as provided in the Employees Provident Fund is a reference drawn under section 44. and how many members shall be forming part of this tribunal, who shall be the members, what are the qualification attributes, are as provided in the charging section, which is section 44. This is again a difference between the new code and the old act. There the reference was drawn to labor code, but now wherever the reference is drawn to labor code, here it is tribunal for the purpose of this code. And members of the council of ministers, or those persons who are holding an office or place of profit in the union or state, they are in the cabinet, then they will not be qualified to become office bearers. Next point, sorry about that, friends. There is, see, I'll provide the provision for the benefit of the readers. So the dispute between, if there is any dispute amongst the parties for the purpose of this code will be between two trade unions, or amongst the members or workers, or trade union which is a federation of several trade unions, which is a federation of trade union and office bearers. Then the office bearers in an unorganized sector shall be not less than, so the composition shall be not less than 1/2 of the total number of office bearers who shall be persons engaged or employed in such industrial establishment with which the trade union is connected. This is with specific reference drawn for any dispute between the trade unions or members. The provision is again the same as provided in the old act. There is no change, including the composition of the committee. For other sectors, which is not an unorganized sector, all office bearers of a registered trade union, except not more than 1/3 of the total number of office bearers, or 5, shall be the composition of the office bearers. And next comes your corporate restructuring with regard to trade union. When there is a change of name proposed by a trade union, then the consent shall be of not less than 2/3 of the total members. Same provision as compared to your old act. And amalgamation with any 2 or more registered unions as prescribed, it shall not prejudice the rights of trade unions. So there are A and B registered trade unions. So please understand that the provision clearly draws reference only to a registered trade union. So the amalgamation provision talks with reference to registered TUs only. So there is A registered trade union, B registered trade union. If it is not going to affect the rights of these trade unions or their creditors, then the amalgamation could be given effect to, provided with regard to change of name, the approving authority shall be the secretary and 7 members. And with regard to amalgamation of 2 trade unions, in our illustration, A and B registered trade union, 7 members from A and 7 members from B, including the secretary of both A and B, shall be the approving members for the purpose of giving effect to this amalgamation. Proposed name, if it is going to be identical or resembles an existing trade union, then the registrar has the authority to refuse the registration of change of name, which is similar provision as available to your companies or LLPs, as the case may be. And amalgamated trade union, where the head office is in a different state, the registrar can register the same on being satisfied, and amalgamation shall have effect from that date. Change in the name shall not affect the rights, or again the amalgamation provisions, the general thumb rule prevails. So just because you are amalgamated or merged, your old liabilities or your old legal proceedings will not be put to an end, or they will not be taken as completed, and hence it will continue. So the continuation of legal proceedings is thus warranted by virtue of this provision. Next comes your dissolution. So the notice of dissolution again signed by 7 member secretary. So 7 member secretary is the proportion applicable throughout, be it your name change, amalgamation, or dissolution. And it shall be sent to registrar within 14 days of dissolution. Same provision as in the old act. And the same shall have effect only on such registration. So though you would have decided for dissolving the trade union, only upon submission to the registrar for the purpose of the Industrial Relations Code, not your registrar of company. So this registrar, where in the last class we discussed about the registrar for the purpose of the definition section, is the registrar of Trade Union as provided under Section 5 of the Industrial Relations Code. So when you refer the provisions of the Registrar of the Trade Union, here they say additional registrar or deputy registrar or joint registrar, whoever is so appointed will also assume the same rank as the Registrar of Trade Union in those trade unions or in those places as directed by the registrar. So these officers, only upon approval by these registrars or additional registrars as the case may be, the dissolution shall be given effect to, not otherwise. And likewise for name change and amalgamation as well, only when the certificate of this particular registration of change of name, or only when the certificate of registration for amalgamation is attested by this registrar, that will be taken as the conclusive evidence and not otherwise. Annual return, the provisions are retained from your old act. So the statement of receipt and expenditure, which is your statement of profit and loss for the year ending 31st December. So it is not your fiscal year, it is 31st December for the purpose of Trade Union Act or the code. Or your statement of assets and liabilities, that is your balance sheet. And the general statement, which also will talk about the change in the office bearers and the rules, if any. So if the rules of the trade union, if there is any change during the interim period, that is from the last annual return submitted till this date. So the latest one as approved by this particular registered trade union shall be submitted to the registrar. And if there is any change in the rules, it shall be notified to the registrar within 15 days. 15 days, again, these provisions are well retained from your old act, there is no change. And registrar or any officer who is authorized may, by general or special order, have the right to inspect the documents. He can physically go to the industrial establishment to verify these rules or general statements or annual returns as the case may be of this registered trade union, or he may necessitate these documents to be produced for evidence or inspection at such place as he may direct. Again, there is this particular saving provision that it should not, this place should not be beyond 15 kilometers from the registered office of the trade union. So he cannot be demanding for production of the documents beyond 15 kilometers. And recognition of trade union or federation of trade union, central or state government may recognize it at central or state level. And if any dispute arises, it shall be decided by such authority as prescribed by the appropriate government. That is your central or state government as the case may be. Because appropriate government, again the definition section clearly says, if it is going to be any industrial establishment which is under the central government purview or your central public sector undertaking, like your railways or your banking, insurance sectors, those will be falling under the directions of central government. Or if it is going to be a state government governed public sector undertaking, then it will be under the state government purview. We will conclude today's session with chapter 4, which is standing order. We already discussed in the introduction of this today's session that this code replaces the 74-year act, that is your Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. Most of the provisions are well retained in the code. Applicability. When it comes to applicability, you had 100 workers in the act. While I mention act, it is the old act. Code refers to the new notified code. In the bill also, if you read, that is the bill which was provided in 2019 also provided for 100 workers. But when the code was notified, the number has become 300 workers. So the applicability of standing order will thus be given effect to for those industrial establishments where the workers who are employed or were employed exceeds 300. And in the old act, you had 100, and again there was this exception 50 in the case of central government employment or the workers where it is falling within the central government ambit. The non-applicability provision is again retained from your old act. There is no change to any industrial establishment where workers employed or those persons to whom the following acts apply. Then this particular standing order provision under your IRC Industrial Relation Code will not be applicable. What are they? Your Civil Rules Act in the Indian Railways Establishment Code or Fundamental Supplementary Rules. Why is this, friends? Because in the respective codes or in the respective acts, you will already have a separate model standing order, and hence to avoid duplication, this particular exemption is provided under the code. Central government shall make model standing order relating to the conditions of services and other matters incidental thereto. From the date of application of this section till the date on which the standing order is certified finally, we are going to see how it is being certified by the certifying authority. The model standing order shall be deemed to be adopted in that establishment, because the old provisions will be applicable and the provisions of this chapter, that is your chapter 4, shall thus apply to the certified standing order as the case may be. How the standing order shall be certified? Within 6 months from the commencement of this code, employer shall prepare the draft standing order. We will see the model standing code in the subsequent slides. This standing order shall contain all the matters as set out in your first schedule. Friends, please note that the matters as provided in your first schedule in the old act and in the new code are almost the same, except for a minor change. We will see that in the next slide. Parties to be consulted by drafting the trade union. The parties for the purpose of this model standing order are 4 members: the trade union, negotiating union, members of the negotiating council, or workers as the case may be. Negotiating union and members of negotiating council already we discussed in the previous webinar while we discussed the chapter 3 provisions relating to trade union. Upon consultation, it shall be forwarded either electronically or otherwise to the certifying officer. So, the certifying officer is the authority for providing the certification. Friends, here the word electronically is inserted in the new code, which was not there before in the old act, because to give way for all the digitalization, this electronically word is included in the new code. And also previously you had the provision of 5 copies being submitted, that is done away with thanks to the advanced technology, to avoid additional paperwork being submitted to various authorities. If model standing order is adopted, it shall be deemed to be certified under this code. Employer shall certainly inform the concerned certifying officer about this. Modifications to any standing order. Once the matters as set out in your first schedule are adopted by the industrial establishment and then certified by the authority, then what if there is any amendment? It shall be drafted within 6 months of application of this chapter and forwarded along with the particulars of the parties, which we already discussed, to the certifying officer for certification of this modification. Registrar, on receipt of this draft model standing order, shall certify, and he shall also seek the parties confirmation. The parties for the purpose again are your trade union, negotiating union, council and the representatives of workers. On receipt of comments and on complying with the principle of natural justice, providing an opportunity for being heard, before certifying the standing order, the certification shall be made only if it is in compliance with the provisions of this code. No doubt. And time limit for certification is within 60 days of receipt. Previously, it was 30 days. Now, it is made 60 days. And certified copy of the order within 7 days of certification shall be forwarded to the employer and the parties consulted. Again, the parties consulted, we have already seen TU, NC, Negotiating Council, NU, Negotiating Union, and the representatives of workers. And the language of this particular final copy shall be in such manner as may be prescribed, and adjudication by certifying officers or appropriate authorities about the fairness or reasonableness of any provisions of the standing order. The provisions are well retained from your old act, there is no change. And the matters with regard to your first schedule also, all the provisions are well retained and lifted from your old act, except for an addition in the first point, which is your workers. In your standing order, while you are going to make it an information which is disseminated to all your workers, categorically you have to provide all the details which are of interest to your workers about their work employment term, about their pay structure more importantly, which they will be interested to look at, about the shift working, about their day shift or night shift, what is the duration in which they have to work, more for protecting the interest of these workers. And attendance, which is maintained by the employer, and the late coming, how the late coming is recorded, if there is going to be any digital mechanism or if there is going to be any register maintained. Here, the first point, the classification of workers, whether they are permanent or temporary, contractual or apprentices, there is this addition in the new code which was not there in the old act, that is the fixed term employment. The fixed term employment is one new terminology which is introduced in the code. What is fixed term employment, friends? I have permanent employees, but for some project, I need certain architects and engineers. I'm just giving an illustration for the purpose of understanding. In such cases, I need only for a fixed duration until the time I have this contractual obligation. Thereafter, I don't require all these architects, engineers. For having my profits well protected and also to avoid incurring additional operating costs subsequent to the project duration, I have this fixed term employment duration which is well recognized under the code. They should be construed on par with your other employees is what the code prescribes. And hence, to protect the interest of those fixed workers as well, this fixed term employment is a new concept which is included. But for that, the matters to be provided in the first schedule are the same as provided in your old act. And also a joint draft of standing orders. I have group companies, holding subsidiary associate companies, and this model standing order, provided they are of the same pattern of establishments, I don't want to have different set of standing orders. Then there is a possibility and statutorily well recognized that I can have this joint standing order adopted. And in that case, while giving this principle of natural justice to take the inputs of all the parties of each establishment shall be considered and well recognized. Existing standing orders shall be deemed to be certified under this code. What if I already have one standing order and all these matters are already well set out in my code? No worries, you can adopt that standing order provided it is well in consonance with the provisions of this industrial relations code, and the provisions of this chapter shall squarely apply to those provisions as well. Civil code powers shall certainly apply to this particular certifying officer and appellate authority, and hence he has the authority to receive evidence, administer on oath and enforce the attendance of witness and compel for production of documents. If there is going to be any clerical or arithmetic mistakes, these may be corrected by the officer or the person who is authorized on his behalf. Appeal against the order of certifying officer. Any party may file an appeal within 60 days of the order to the appropriate appellate authority if he is not satisfied with the order. All these provisions are well retained from your old act. There is no change. Operation of standing order if appeal is preferred. On expiry of 7 days from the date on which the copies of the order of the appellate authority are sent, operation of the standing order, certainly if appeal is preferred, shall happen. Register of standing orders. Final copy shall be filed by the certifying officer in a register maintained for the purpose. Same provisions as in the old act. Certifying officer to furnish copy of the certifying order, standing order. Upon request by any party and on payment of such fee as may be prescribed, this particular copy of the standing order which is adopted by the employer shall certainly be furnished by the certifying officer. And modification of standing order not allowed for a period of 6 months from the date of the operation of the order, provided if there is an agreement between the employers and workers, and if there is going to be an agreement between the trade unions or other parties as discussed already, then the modification is permitted. Otherwise, modification is not permitted for a period of 6 months from the date of operation of the order or from the date of operation of your last modified order, as the case may be. And application for modification, just like how you submit the model standing order to the certifying officer, the application for modification also shall be submitted to the appropriate authority, and all the provisions of this chapter shall equally apply to this particular modified standing order as well. and oral evidence is not admissible in any court. Oral evidence, the interpretation of standing order, suspension provisions are lifted directly from your old act. There is no change. Oral evidence which are having an effect of adding or varying the standing order as finally certified under this chapter is not admissible in any court. Hence, it shall be certainly produced in writing. Interpretation of standing order. If there is going to be any question as to the application of the order, then the tribunal, we already discussed that it is the industrial tribunal as constituted under 44 section. After giving an opportunity of being heard to all the concerned parties, that is your negotiating union, negotiating council, representatives of the workers or trade union, will decide about the question involved, and the decision with regard to this particular subject matter shall be the decision of the tribunal, which shall be final and binding on all the concerned parties. And pending investigation or inquiry of any complaint against a worker, until it is completed within a period of 90 days from the date of this particular suspension, his remuneration shall be well protected. And just because he is suspended, he should not be curtailed of any allowance. And hence, a standing order shall provide for subsistence allowance to be paid to those suspended workers as well, which is to protect the suspended workers. And the allowance percentage is also, as in the old act, there is no change, friends. Allowance percentage is 50% of wages for first 90 days of suspension and 75% of wages for the remaining period of suspension if the delay in completion of disciplinary proceedings against such worker is not directly attributable to the conduct of such worker. So the caveat here is, if this particular disciplinary proceeding is not directly related to the conduct of this worker, so if there is going to be any misconduct or if he was involved in any tortuous act leading to some dispute in the establishment, then he will not be benefited of this suspension allowance. An exemption by appropriate government. The appropriate government has the prerogative right to grant exemption by virtue of a notification to any industrial establishment from the provisions of this particular chapter. Friends, with this we are concluding chapter 3 and 4 of Industrial Relations Code. I'll be happy to take your questions. Otherwise, we will conclude the session, friends. Thank you very much. We'll continue the provisions of IRC in our next webinar as well. Take care, stay safe.